before we knew what dinner church was, we kept our table open at our house. If that's what this season looks like until we can plant one in the city that we're in, then our door will be open and our table will be available.
Welcome to the Dinner Church podcast. Dinner churches are affordable, they are simple, they are very effective at evangelism, and they are rapidly increasing across the country and across all denominational lines and across all social locations, large city, rural, in between. I am Verlin Fosner. I am the director of the Dinner Church Collective, but I'm also a pastor of a historic church, a 100-year-old church in Seattle, Washington. And 20 years ago, our church went into an unexplainable decline. Much frustration. That soon led to much prayer. And we really felt the Lord direct us to begin to experiment with this ancient form of church, the table church, if you will. At this point, we have 14 dinner churches, and we're opening new ones all the time. In this season of the podcast, I am going to be reuniting with leaders that we've had a chance to train, and I think you're going to find it very inspiring. If you're interested in learning more, please visit dinnerchurch.com. And if you're interested in learning a lot more, once you get to that site, toggle through to the Dinner Church School of Leadership, which is our graduate course, and it is the deepest dive into the history and the theology of the dinner church. And now, this week's interview. Welcome. This is Verlin Fosner with the Dinner Church Collective, and we have a wonderful pair of guests today, husband and wife church planting team, Ben and Jordan Arias. And I want to just jump right into some things. Welcome, by the way. So glad to have you guys here.
Hello.
Thanks for having us.
We have been able to track a few miles together in the last few years, and the Lord has really used them to see the dinner church go forward, starting initially in Chicago, city of. What was it like to pastor as a bivocational couple a church and be a part of a church team in Chicago?
I think we are very fortunate that we had such a beautiful team, such a great covering from our senior pastors and even the other campus pastors that we worked next to and alongside. I think when I think of city, because I'm kind of a country girl, but when I think of city, it sounds really intimidating, but it was really beautiful. It felt like home. It felt comfortable and communal in a way that I don't think inner city always is portrayed as. So it was a blast. It was definitely an adventure.
Let me follow up on this, Jordan. Was the fear of coming into the city far greater than the reality for you?
I don't know if fear necessarily would be the best word for it. It was more of, I just didn't know what to expect. And so, you watch TV, you watch the Chicago Fire, the Chicago police shows or whatever, and you think that it's one way. Then there's little pockets of community, and especially in the neighborhoods in Chicago that feel just as homey as down south. So it was great. But the more I got to know it, the more comfortable I was.
To your point, there is that fear. Chicago has sort of the notoriety of being a violent place. And while that is true in some areas, you find that people sort of bond together closer, and there's more of a look out for one another because we're sort of faced up against that. And so when you create something like a community dinner, I think people are already more inept to be a part of that because of this battle against, violence or hate. So,
yeah, there is a real familial surprise that happens inside of the urban sociology and the development of neighborhoods and people and groups, and a need for each other, a dependency on each other is surprising for those coming from the outside that aren't used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. How is it that you guys became interested and introduced to the dinner church?
Well, that is 100% the Koistras. Our lead pastors saw something in us, I think, that maybe we didn't even see in our own lives, and sort of slingshotted us in the direction of dinner church. I had been in the restaurant industry of Chicago coming up to that, and the Lord was doing something in my own life personally, sort of. I was coming to a reckoning of whose kingdom was I building. And so I chose to leave the restaurant industry. And that was something that I very much enjoyed doing. And we started attending Hope kind of at the same time. And so when we were a part of that membership class at Hope Church in LaGrange, Illinois, Hal mentioned that they were interested in planting dinner church. And of course my hand shoots up. What's dinner church? I want to be a part of that in any aspect I can. I love cooking. I love food. I love Jesus. And so they brought us to the encounter, maybe weeks later.
That encounter day conference that was in Chicago, I remember it well. It was quite the day. What did that actually speak to you? What really jumped out at you the most, if you can recall, from being there that day?
I remember sitting, listening to one of Melody's many stories of y'all's experience. And it was that one scripture where he said, "Were our hearts not burning?" And I was just moved. And I couldn't believe that there was a name to just the beauty of the table, and that we weren't the only ones that felt how powerful and holy that it was, and that there was even more to it than just we like to eat meals with people and think it's important, that it was actually biblical, that it was scriptural, that we were modeling the life of Jesus. And it just felt like a puzzle piece clicked into place that I don't think we even knew was missing. It was powerful. And I left and I just felt like I was going to explode. I was just so excited to even know about it and hear about it, much less lead something even, which was just a blessing.
Yeah. For me, I think we were already doing something that we needed was creating community. We had left a church where I wasn't really involved with because I was cooking on Sundays. And so we just felt this need for community, and it was pressing so heavily on our hearts that we started to create community where we were. And we started doing something called Taco Church in our small basement, with it just crammed in with people. So and most of the people that were coming were ministers and, pastors that were serving on our Wednesday night service. We just opened up our place as a place to hang out and do life together with one another and eat tacos. Wow. I was still cooking. And so you kind of put that along the same lines. We were already doing something, but we didn't know what it was that the Lord was calling us to. Yeah. And when we left Evangel in Hanover, Illinois, we knew that this was it. Yeah. This was what the Lord had for us. We just didn't know what was the next step or how to get there.
Let me ask you a question about your bivocational approach to ministry, because you continued with other jobs as well as working in the church. And Hal and Don got you pointed kind of quickly into the point people for the dinner church that was opening up. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. But the bivocational part, how did that help you? Or did it help you?
Well, we had always wanted to plant a dinner church in Chicagoland. It was the home site for our Convoy of Hope events that we tag teamed with Convoy of Hope. And at the time I was working with Starbucks, still am, there was a need for my position at a store within that community. And so I jumped on that as quick as I could in order to be a part of the community, in order to work in the community, in order to understand more of what the community needed, sort of the DNA of that community. So working in the community, putting myself in a position where I can have like a front facing role with the community itself was instrumental, I'd say.
Giving you those relationships that you were able to capitalize on that you already had as a result of working out
definitely
in that world, in that forward-facing world. Yeah, that is great. So at some point, I know Don and Hal scooped you up and brought you guys out to Seattle for an immersion here. What did you see here that gave you greater definition and greater vision for what you might do in Chicago?
For us, I think it was more of the practical that it was really integral to see it happen the day of, what it was like, the pre-service prayer, the afterwards, visiting the different dinner churches around Seattle, just seeing the different kind of flavors of what it looked like. And then I remember specifically the first night being in Pike Place and sitting at a table, and I just felt like I had been there before. Like, I just knew Jesus was there. Like, it just felt like home in a way that I've been in church all my life. I'm a pastor's kid, but it just felt real and authentic and raw, and the way that church, I think, should feel. And so that was really, really neat. And also just getting to know y'all's heart even more, and the other beautiful dinner church pastors in Seattle, and hearing their experiences was just really, really invaluable. And I still pull from my notes. Sometimes I go back and want to remember what was said. And it was perfect. If you haven't gone, just go.
Yeah. We had started the small group DVD in November of 2019. And the plan all along was to launch in spring of 2020. So we had traveled to Seattle in February of 2020. But I remember, and I don't know that I've admitted this to anybody, and I believe that this might be for somebody out there that potentially has the passion and the vision for this, but they don't know what to do next. I remember sitting at Hal's house feeling like kind of like a fraud, because here I am sitting as the pastor, as the one that lead this church, this dinner church. What is dinner church? We'll come to the small group. We'll learn all about it. And I had never seen it. Yeah. At this point, Hal and Dawn had gone to Seattle, so they had it sort of in their bones of what it looked like. But I'm a visual learner, so I need to see it for myself. I'm very practical. I want to see how many chafing dishes you have out there, what you're doing for coffee. I want to see all of that. And I just remember feeling like a fraud leading this small group as a leader, as a pastor, not knowing what it would look like. And so I remember clarity happening when we were leaving our Airbnb in Roosevelt, knowing, okay, I know what it looks like now. And the passion and the zeal for this thing is burning even harder.
Yeah.
To say the least. And we sat there in our Airbnb the night after Pike Place and just wrote everything down we saw. And it's hilarious. We do have those notes still to see what her perspective was and my perspective was. It's like, I think they served roast beef and whatever. It was like, who cares about that?
I didn't write any of that.
Oh, man. Well, I have the feeling that the two of you make a pretty good team as you cover different things on your notes. Yeah. So tell us about your planting experience in Chicago. You go back to Chicago. Your church is ready to open up its multi-site, but of a dinner church variety. What was that planting experience like for you guys?
So we had a building in Pilsen, the neighborhood of Pilsen in Chicago, and we decided to piggyback a dinner church location off of that church. We planted that one in November of 2021. And for about 6 months, we had that one by itself. The plan always was to sort of copy what y'all did in Seattle with having that main kitchen, cooking out of that kitchen, and then serving multiple locations of dinner church. And so about 6 months later, after planting on the back of Hope Pilsen, we launched finally what was always initially intended as our first location in a public park. And planting that one was different in the sense that people, I think, were more curious. Mm-hmm. When it was in a public space, people they would poke their head in. Where I remember being on the streets of Chicago in front of a church building labeled church, and they would walk past even when I would wave them down to say, hey, we have free dinner inside, come in. And I remember I had a buddy that lived right down the block from Pilsen, and he was a cook that I worked with. And I said, hey, it's good seeing you. Just so you know, I'm cooking over here. You should come hang out with me. And he said, you know what? The price is too steep to walk into those doors. And that's what breaks my heart about this, just where we are. But the community itself has since embraced Pilsen, and the line is wrapped out the door. And because they know who we are, once we sort of went in there and we were consistent with a once a week meeting every single week without breaking, we were there always. The community started to see that consistency, and they started to embrace us and want to be a part of the dinner.
Right. But I think Benjamin glossed over a huge fact was that when we came to Seattle, 3 weeks later, the whole world shut down. And so
I didn't want to mention it.
We come from Seattle just on fire, ready to go, saying, let's do this. And we're telling everyone that we've been in our small group, it's going to be this. We actually have some answers to your questions that we didn't know. It's wonderful. And then there was just this period of nothing. But I think looking back at it now, that was such a blessing because we really could hone in on what we wanted our culture to be, what was necessary, what was unnecessary, what could have worked, 3 months prior, but doesn't work now. And especially in that time of isolation, the loneliness just grew. And so we opened right when we were supposed to, because it was right after people probably hadn't had meals with very many people. And so, there's always God things, and sometimes it looks like disaster, but He's always moving, even when it looks like we're stuck,
That's good.
What's one thing you guys did really well in your opening?
I think we emphasized devotion with our team. Yeah. We were intentional about talking about the night. Like I said, I come from the hospitality industry, so pre-service meeting, post-service meeting is always important. Sort of going over, we called them, as a pastor, I wanted to pastor my volunteers, but also my guests of honor. And so in that pre-service moment was the time where I would pastor my volunteers. And I believe we did that really well. Post-service is a time where I empowered our volunteers. So we brought forth prayer needs. We talked about the night. We called them hallelujahs and hindrances. So what was your hallelujah? And anyone that wanted to share something that they had, that they saw that night. It was a lot of the time when we had new people, I'd put them on the spot. Hey, you heard about dinner church? We talk about it all the time. What did it look like to you? And what that would do is it would give us sort of inspiration, or it would give like wind under our wings to know that we're coming in here week in and week out, and this is somebody new seeing it for their first time, sort of giving encouragement about what they saw. And then hindrances, we can't avoid the hindrances. If we see something that's snagging service, we need to talk about it. And to normalize sort of the negatives is important, because it's the only way that we can build something, better. Talk about what the thing that got in our way so we can remove it, and it won't. So I believe that that's something that we did really well with our team.
Did you find your Starbucks management skills kicking into gear in terms of building your team in similar ways and just team building in general?
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. You can't help with a little corporate training for sure. Being careful to not put it in so much of a box is also the line I'd say you'd have to walk finely. So like making sure that what you're doing is necessary. You don't want to do anything that's not necessary. If you can cut it, because then it's a waste of your time and the people around you that are volunteering. So yes, I would say that the corporate training definitely helps, but don't get so bogged down in like, okay, we need to have 5 minutes of there is no order of service. A general understanding of what it is important, but the Holy Spirit's going to lead. So allow that to happen.
Dinner Church is a church. It's not a business. And there is a different path to walk. And yet there's some lessons to be learned and things to be brought over from just managing people well. That's for sure. What's one thing you guys didn't do well that you would do different had you the opportunity to do it over?
For me, I would have been more curious in the deeper discipleship opportunities. The pre-huddle was beautiful to disciple our volunteers, people that are week in and week out. And we had people that didn't go to our church on Sundays. They went to another church. And so it was really interesting to see kind of a meld of different beliefs and practices, but also all of us loved the Lord. Mm-hmm. But I would have loved to have kind of explored what it would have looked like for our guests if they wanted to dive deeper and to have found more opportunities to do that. And weekly care that were not on, our dinners were on Tuesdays. So if there was a way to have followed up with people, not everyone had phones or not everyone was around regularly. So that was kind of difficult, but maybe trying to find another way to keep in touch with everyone throughout the week. So that would be my thing. Yeah. But
yeah, I think quite consistently the discipleship issue comes up really fast right about now. Yeah. When I ask people, what do you feel like you're kind of weak on? Well, we're serving the food and our team is all there getting stuff rolling and we're up there preaching the Jesus stories, but there's something missing in the middle, this discipleship piece. So I think that is a very normal, very natural growth step that begins to call leaders really quickly. And so I'm really not surprised to hear that.
And it wouldn't be for everyone, just the people that were curious to go a little more, a little deeper. Right. Not everyone's at that place. So we want to honor that as well.
For me, it would have been the same thing in sense of giving those opportunities to people that wanted to meet. It was challenging with the bivocational part is challenging because you're being expected elsewhere throughout the week. So at the same time as doing Starbucks, pastoring the dinner church, I'm also getting a degree online. So there was that. I had balancing school with all of those things. It was challenging as well. I'd also say for people starting out, we had the luxury of having a public space where we had security. We had people that had our back just in case something sort of popped off. We had a few instances where neurodivergent guests would come in and for whatever reason they would be upset about something and they would cause a scene. And so I remember one time it hit me very hard. We discussed as a team in post-service, how do we handle sort of the person taking too much, the person overstepping boundary, the person that just comes in with bags and of Glad Tupperware to put in all the extra stuff. How do we deal with that? And creating those boundaries, that was something we kind of stumbled into.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, we handled it well, but knowing that on the forefront may have helped, but that's not to say that you can't figure it out along the way.
Well, in cities like yours and mine, there are neighborhoods that really need a very smart and thought through security plan. So you definitely stepped right into that need and had to get that solved right away. Not to be feared, though. I know that in ours, even in the worst neighborhoods, there might be one or at the most 2 times in an entire year where some level of security involvement would need to be employed. But quite generally, the peace in the room is so attended to by the Spirit, and there's something about the presence of Christ and Christ's people that sets such a peace in the room that it really has a genuine impact. Did you find that to be true in your story as well?
100% without a doubt. Anytime somebody new would come and we would give them that opportunity to speak in our huddles, that would be the first thing they say. I can't imagine, they would say, wow, you guys handled all of those people in such a short amount. That's amazing. But there's also peace. It wasn't chaotic. It wasn't, an uproar. It was peace every single time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Much. And I think that also is because of our team, because they were so focused on maintaining that. They came prayed up. They came ready to serve. Yeah. And that, I think that they helped protect that in a really beautiful way, but they also helped embrace that in their own way as well. So when the Lord moves, he moves through everyone, I think. So even our guests, but especially our team as well, they, we had the shoes of peace on and we were ready. So.
And that's an encouragement that we need to really pass along to people that are thinking about this, because quite frankly, they're beginning to do church for people that aren't quite like them. Maybe have not had the kind of families and live in the suburban neighborhoods. And now they're starting to do church for people that are different. And quite frankly, it seems a little scary on the front side, but don't be afraid of this. It is the rule of peace absolutely comes to bear in a huge way. And I love that about your story. Thank you for sharing that. Well, there has been a bit of a change that has happened with you guys, and we're going to talk about Georgia here in a moment. But before we do, what is one of the most memorable Jesus stories that you've ever preached while in Chicago?
For me, and it always goes back to this story, is the prodigal son. That's my testimony. And to tell that story and weave in my experience. And it just ends with such an invitation that you can't help but want to tell people who might not have ever heard that story. And that example of a loving father. I'm fortunate enough that I have a great father and he is the best dad ever, but I know that not everyone has that experience. And so to mirror that and say, that's the kind of dad that God is. And it's my favorite one. It makes me cry every time. And it's something that helps me remember how grateful I am that the Lord embraced me when I came home full of muck and shame and dirt. And he gave me a robe and a ring and made me a feast. And so that can be someone else's experience as well. So that's my favorite one.
What did it feel like? What did it feel like when you're actually preaching that to a room full of prodigals, where in the more traditional settings, there may be one or two prodigals, but mostly it's the already saved and already doing great on many fronts that fill up the rooms. And now all of a sudden you're in a room where it's full of prodigals and you see them hanging on your words and you see that look in their eye of longing. And what did that feel like for you?
I think it has a profoundness that I don't think you get on a Sunday service with church people.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's how Jesus felt telling the crowds that story as well. And it's just an honor.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything different other than say yes to the Lord. And so I think that that's also a really good thing to remind everyone that it's not us, and it's not because of anything other than we accepted the call. And it just makes it's so simple. It's so simple. And how beautiful is it that such a simple story can be told over a simple meal in a simple setting.
Yeah.
And that's just the heart of Jesus, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben.
For me, it was always a difficult thing preparing a Jesus story. I found that I was most effective by just starting from the beginning. So I would start at the beginning of Matthew and I would read it myself out of the Jesus Story Bible and sort of write the things that stuck out to me and maybe that I hadn't noticed before. But I always liked talking about Jesus's first words when he came on the scene. What was repent and be baptized and to change and this idea that why he came. I remember another story that I told about the demon-possessed man in the synagogue. And on that one, I spoke to the fear that people can have with demons and that sort of thing. And there was this real power of acknowledging that that's real, because potentially a lot of these people deal with that more often than most of our other church people. But it was almost like this, wait, you have an answer to this thing that I'm dealing with? You have an answer to this possession that exists that maybe I'm feeling, and to always focus on Jesus was incredible. It was incredible.
It was kind of a surprise to some of our staff to come across folks who believed absolutely in the devil, not sure they believed in God. And of course, in the church, it's kind of the other way around. God is real, but the devil is almost like a theory. And yet out in the broken, pained world with the least and the last and the lost and the left behinds, they know that evil and darkness is trying to crush them out there. That's really not a mystery to them.
Wow.
And now you're speaking to that with answers. And wow. Well, that is superb, you guys. Thank you for sharing that. So let's move to Georgia. You guys now live in Georgia, and you planted a couple of dinner churches in Chicago as an extension of an established church. But now you have dinner church deep in your soul, and you can't imagine not doing it.
Can't shake it.
But you're can't shake it. But you're going through the process of getting ready to open up one, but this time without really a home church right at your back that has the same level of support and the same level of understanding for the dinner church history and the dinner church vision. What is this like for you right now?
Let's see. It's liberating, and it's kind of lonely sometimes, but it's like, we know that this is why we're here. It's just, if we can choose, and Benjamin helped me with this the other day, because I was sad that we don't have a home church yet, but he was like, let's look at it like an adventure. And while we're kind of church shopping, which I did not realize how good we had it at our old church. And when you have a home base and then you move and you don't have one again, you realize just how absolutely blessed we were. And I think it's interesting though, because when we visit churches and we're trying to figure out where the Lord wants us just for our own covering and our own support and our family, we can I'm looking at it through the lens of, is this church culture something that matches the heart of dinner church? We don't want to go into a church and just be like, hi, this is us. This is what we're doing. Right. Make room for us. It's finding out what their vision and their heartbeat is. And if it aligns with the spirit of the Jesus table. And so for me, it's kind of given me the ability to be a little picky, be a little bit, I don't know. I'm not considering churches that I might have considered before being in this role. But I think to me, it's before we knew what dinner church was and before we had the assignment, we kept our table open at our house. Yeah. And if that's what this season looks like until we can plant one in the city that we're in, then our door will be open and our table will be available. And if it's just my mom and dad and my sister and her fiance for right now, then I want to steward that and I want to honor that, because that's what we did before and the Lord blessed us. And so just maintaining that frequency and that source of hospitality just within our own home base, I don't think that will be a mistake in any capacity during this kind of search and testing the waters and just seeing where the need is. Because I'm from Georgia, but this is a completely different town than where I grew up. So I'm learning the ropes just as much as Ben is. So
I think for me, it's in this time, community is extremely important. This is not something that I'd say go out and do on your own by any stretch of the imagination. Finding people that we can talk to about dinner church in order to speak potentially to what the Lord has been doing in their own hearts already. We believe strongly that whatever it is the Lord has for us out here is we're going to find it. And it's not so much that we're here, the Lord this is not why we're here in Georgia. I think this is why we are alive.
Sure.
This is what the Lord has put us on this planet to do. And for the longest time in my life, I didn't know that. After doing it now, it's like, this is something I will do anywhere forever. I go.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it's North Georgia, back to Chicago, Seattle, wherever, Europe, anywhere I am, we will do dinner church. It might look different, but this is what we will do. And it might not be with another church, but it's going to be dinner church.
Yes.
Yeah, that is really a powerful thought, you guys. Dinner church, it is a theology. It's not just something you do. It's not a strategy, although there's some very strategic things in it. It's the new Passover table. Yeah. And whether you do the new Passover from your own table with whoever of your neighborhood and friends and family and whatnot that you begin to gather, or whether you are doing it 100 at a time in a community space with a church backing that's sending a lot of people to do it with you on that size and scope and scale, a new Passover table is a new Passover table. Mm-hmm. And once you embrace the theology of that, it's in you. And I think that's really an important thing for a lot of potential dinner church leaders is this thing in you like a part of your Christian identity, or is it just something you're doing for now for your church because it seems like a good idea? I mean, that is a very key and critical point for a lot of leaders to really pray through within themselves. And I love that part of your guys' story. How do you see this actually developing from here while you're in Georgia? And without you giving away or committing yourself to something that might not actually work out, what do you think the next steps of Dinner Church are going to really develop into for you guys there? Take a predictive stab at it.
I believe Jordan was spot on when she talked about stewarding our table. I believe it's going to start at our table. I believe it's going to start with the people that we meet in this community, and conversations will happen at that table. For so long, when we moved from Georgia, where we met, back to Chicago, the table was in my mom's garage for 5 years. And we had our first year of marriage around that table. And the minute we busted it out in Chicago, it just felt like that this is the centerpiece of our home. Yeah. And I believe it's going to start with conversations around that dinner table. And so I don't know who's going to come across that table and who's going to hear the vision of and theology of Dinner Church, but it's going to start at that table.
Yeah. That is really beautiful. My goodness. Thank you guys so much for being with me today and sharing the story with our audience, those that are already leading dinner churches and those that are thinking about getting started. And man, I just love the takeaway of it being so deeply embroiling out of your soul and out of your Christian identity, your Christian vocation, that we're here, we have a table so we can do a new Passover from right here and let it grow where it grows, even though in your recent history, it was a pretty big happening in a big city.
Yeah.
But boy, that's a beautiful story. We have been sharing time here with Ben and Jordan Arias. Thank you guys so much, and blessings on you as you nurture yet another Jesus table into existence in Georgia.
Amen.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
This podcast has been brought to you by Fresh Expressions and the Dinner Church Collective. If you want to learn more about the Dinner Church Collective, please go to dinnerchurch.com. And if you want to learn more about our graduate program, Dinner Church School of Leadership, Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement that is doing church for people who don't do church in a contextual way that genuinely matters for them. The Dinner Church Collective is one of those streams that is in the middle of this worldwide movement, and it's a great honor to be a part. I am Verlin Fosner, your host. The editor of this podcast is Joel Limbauen, and the producers are Kathleen Blackley and Chris Morton. Senior director is Dr. Chris Backert. Please help us spread the word if you would. Give a review on Apple Music or Spotify, and please share this episode with other friends that might be interested, and blessings upon your work for the gospel.